On June 8, 2014, Officer Alan Beck and his partner Igor Saldo were taking their lunch break at a pizza restaurant in northeast Las Vegas. Both men were patrol officers with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department. On that day, without provocation, the two officers were ambushed and shot dead as they sat there eating their lunch. The two officers went to work every day to protect the citizens of the Las Vegas Valley, and they were murdered for no reason except the uniform that they proudly wore. The case that you're about to hear is about a public official who took advantage of those officers' memories for her personal gain. You're going to hear that the defendant, Michele Fiore, started a fake charity and raised tens of thousands of dollars supposedly for the purpose of building a memorial to Officer Alan Beck. But you're going to hear that that was a lie, and the defendant knew that it was a lie. You're going to hear that none of the money that she raised, not 1 cent, was spent for a memorial to Officer Beck. We're going to follow the money and show you how she spent it. On herself and on her family, paying her rent, her political fundraising bills, for plastic surgery, for her daughter's wedding. What I want to do now is go over with you some of the evidence that we're going to present at this trial that's going to demonstrate the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You're going to learn that, during the events of this case, Michele Fiore, the defendant, was a city councilwoman for Ward 6 in the city of Las Vegas. Her predecessor, a man named Stephen Ross, had pushed forward an idea to name a park in Ward 6 after Officer Alan Beck. You're going to hear that in 2019, after ground was finally broken on the park, the defendant began raising money from her list of donors supposedly to build a statue of Officer Beck in front of his namesake park. You're going to see that she did this using two organizations that she controlled, both of which she was the sole signatory on their bank accounts. You're going to hear that she used her political action committee, which was called Future for Nevadans, and she also used a new nonprofit that she had just started called the Bright Present Foundation. You're going to hear that she promised donors, both orally and in writing, that 100% of their contributions were going to be used for the Alan Beck statue. You're going to hear that 0% of their contributions were used for the statue. You're going to learn that neither the sculptor nor Officer Beck's family ever received any money from the defendant or her charity or her political action committee. You're going to hear that the defendant never told her donors that their money wasn't used for the statue. You're going to hear that she never asked her donors whether she could use their money for something besides the statue. You're going to hear that the defendant never made her donors whole for failing to use their money for the purpose for which she asked it. During this trial, you're going to hear the testimony of donors who were defrauded into giving their money to Michele Fiore. The people that you're going to hear from come from different backgrounds, and they each had their own reasons for giving. Some of them were friends of Michele Fiore, others didn't even know her. Most of them gave specifically in order to honor Officer Beck, but some gave to support law enforcement and veterans. The donors that you're going to hear from include business leaders, attorneys, members of a labor union, public officials. One of them is the governor of this state. But the donors that you hear from all have this in common. All of them gave because they wanted to make a charitable donation, and none of them would have given if they thought that the defendant was going to spend their money on her personal expenses, but you're going to hear that that's exactly what she did. You're going to hear from businesses who received money from Fiore, fake charity during the period that she was raising money for the Beck statue. And you're going to hear how she spent her donors' money. Rent on her half-acre house up in Centennial Hills, printing and fundraising bills for her political campaigns, plastic surgery. You're going to hear that she gave tens of thousands of dollars to a company that was owned by one of her daughters, and that she paid thousands more to the venue where her other daughter was getting married. You're going to see bank records that expose the defendant's theft in black and white. You're going to see that in many instances the defendant spent the money on the same day that it came in. You're going to see that in many instances she used donor money to pay bills that she had no other way to pay. You're going to hear from an FBI forensic accountant who followed the money as the defendant used cash, money orders, and transfers to other companies that she controlled in an attempt to cover up and conceal her fraud. Now, a statue of Officer Beck was eventually built and erected outside Alan Beck Memorial Park. It's just that the defendant didn't have anything to do with paying for it. You're going to hear that the statue was donated and paid for in full by a private real estate developer, the same developer that constructed Alan Beck Memorial Park. You're going to see that the developer signed a contract with the sculptor and that they had announced their intention to pay for the statue well before the defendant raised the vast majority of the money in this case. We're going to show you that the defendant knew at the time that she raised the money that she had no intention of spending that money on a statue and that she had every intention of spending it on herself. At the end of the day, this case is about a woman who defrauded charitable donors asking for money to memorialize fallen officers but spending it on her personal and political expenses. It's not any more complicated than that. As you listen to the witnesses and the arguments during the course of this trial, all that we ask of you is that you remain focused on the evidence. And after you hear all the testimony and see the documents, we're confident that there's only going to be one verdict that is consistent with the evidence, and that's a verdict of guilty on all counts.
Thank you for attending the first episode of the Fiore felony file. This episode was the opening statement, given by the federal prosecutor, directly from the official court transcripts. Transcripts Michele Fiore believed would never come to light, and that, even if they did, voters would never truly understand. But we believe the people of Nye County are capable of understanding the fact for themselves. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Fiore felony file.